Hey there, welcome back to Daily Devotions. My name is Deezy, your one and only, and I'm here to bring you day 25 of our 365-day journey. Before I get started, why don't you go ahead and leave a little like, comment a little bit, let me know how you're feeling today. Subscribe to my Patreon. I'll leave a link in the description so you can check that out. Glad to have you with me today. It's going to be a beautiful one. We're finishing up Genesis. We're going to be starting in chapter 50. And we're going to be finishing that segment in Exodus chapter 2 verse 10. So let's go ahead and start with that. Chapter 50. Joseph threw himself on his father and wept over him and kissed him. Then Joseph told the physicians who served him to embalm his father's body, so Jacob was embalmed. The embalming process took usual 40 days. Then the Egyptians mourned his death for 70 days. When the period of mourning was over, Joseph approached Pharaoh's advisors and said, "Please do me this favor and speak to the Pharaoh on my behalf. Tell him that my father made me swear an oath. He said to me, 'Listen, I am about to die. Take my body back to the land of Canaan and bury me in the tomb I prepared for myself. So please allow me to go and bury my father. After this burial, I'll return without delay.' Pharaoh agreed to Joseph's request. 'Go and bury your father as he made you promise,' he said. So Joseph went up to bury his father. He was accompanied by all the Pharaoh's officials, all the senior members of Pharaoh's household, and all the senior officials of Egypt. Joseph also took his entire household and his brothers and their households, but they left their little children and flocks and herds in the land of Goshen. A great number of chariots and charioteers accompanied Joseph. When they arrived at the threshing floor of Atad, near the Jordan River, they held a very great and solemn memorial service with a 7-day period of mourning for Joseph's father. The local residents, the Canaanites, watched them mourning at the threshing floor of Atad. Then they renamed the place Abel Mizraim, for they said, "This is the place of deep mourning for the Egyptians." So Jacob's sons did what they have commanded them. They carried the body to Canaan and buried him in the cave of the field of Machpelah near Mamre. This is the cave that Abraham has bought for a permanent burial site from Ephron the Hittite. Joseph reassures his brothers. After burying Jacob, Joseph returned to Egypt with his brothers and all who had accompanied him to his father's burial. But now that their father was dead, Joseph's brothers became fearful. "Now Joseph will show his anger and pay us back all the wrong we did to him," they said. So they sent this message to Joseph: "Before your father died, he instructed us to say to you, 'Please forgive your brothers. They did great wrong to you, for their sin is treating you so cruelly. So we, the servants of God of your father, beg you to forgive our sin.'" When Joseph received the message, he broke down and wept. Then his brothers came and threw themselves down before Joseph. "Look, we are your slaves," they said. But Joseph replied, "Don't be afraid of me. Am I God that can punish you? You intended me harm, but God intended all for good. He brought me to this position so I could save lives of many people. No, don't be afraid. I'll continue to take care of you and your children." So he reassured them by speaking kindly to them. The death of Joseph. So Joseph and his brothers and their families continued to live in Egypt. Joseph lived to the age of 110. He lived to see 3 generations of descendants of his son Ephraim. He lived there to see the birth of the children of Manasseh's son Machir, who he claimed as his own. "Soon I will die," Joseph told his brothers, "but God will surely come to help lead you out of the land of Egypt. He will bring you back to the land he solemnly promised to give Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob." Then Joseph made the sons of Israel swear an oath, and he said, "When God comes to help you and lead you back, you may take my bones with you." So Joseph died at the age of 110. The Egyptians embalmed him, and his body was placed in a coffin in Egypt. So that was the end of Genesis, actually. Whoop, whoop. Let's go ahead and start off with Exodus chapter 1, the Israelites in Egypt. These are the names of the sons of Israel who moved to Egypt with their father, each with his family: Reuben, Simon, Levi, Judah, Issachar, Zebulun, Benjamin, Dan, Naphtali, Gad, and Asher. In all, Jacob had 70 descendants in Egypt, including Joseph, who was already there. In time, Joseph and all his brothers died, ending that generation, but their descendants, the Israelites, had many children and grandchildren. In fact, they multiplied so greatly they became extremely powerful and filled the land. Eventually, a new king came to power in Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph or what he had done. He said to his people, "Look, the people of Israel now outnumber us and are stronger than we are. We must make a plan to keep them from growing even more. If we don't and war breaks out, they will join our enemies and fight against us. Then they will escape from the country." So the Egyptians made the Israelites their slaves. They appointed brutal slave drivers over them, hoping to wear them down with crushing labor. They forced them to build the cities of Pithom and Ramses and supply the centers for the king. But the more the Egyptians oppressed them, the more the Israelites multiplied and spread, and the more alarmed the Egyptians became. So the Egyptians worked the people of Israel without mercy. They made their lives bitter, forcing them to mix mortar and make bricks and do all the work in the fields. They were ruthless in their demand. Then Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, gave the order to the Hebrew midwives, Sipprah and Puah, "When you give the Hebrew women as they give birth, watch as they deliver. If it is a baby boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live." But because the midwives feared God, they refused to obey the king's orders. They allowed the boys to live too. So the king of Egypt called for the midwives. "Why have you done this?" he demanded. "Why have you allowed the boys to live?" "The Hebrew women are not like Egyptian women," the midwives replied. "They are more vigorous, and they have babies so quickly that we cannot get there in time." So God was good to the midwives, and the Israelites continued to multiply, growing more and more powerful. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families of their own. Then Pharaoh gave his order to kill all the people, throw every newborn Hebrew boy into the Nile River, but you may not let the girls live. Chapter 2, the birth of Moses. About this time, a man and a woman from the tribe of Levi got married. The woman became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She thought she saw he was a special boy and kept him hidden for 3 months. But when she could no longer hide him, she got a basket and made papyrus reeds and waterproofed it with tar and pitch. She put the baby in the basket and laid it among the reeds along the bank of the Nile River. The baby's sisters stood at a distance, watching to see what would happen. Soon Pharaoh's daughter came down to bathe in the river, and her attendants walked along the river bank. When the princess saw the basket on the reeds, she sent her maid to get it for her. When the princess opened it, she saw the baby. The little boy was crying, and she felt sorry for him. "This must be one of the Hebrew children," she said. Then the baby's sister approached the princess. "Should I go find the one Hebrew woman to nurse the baby for you?" she asked. "Yes, do," the princess replied. So the girl went to call the baby's mother. "Take this baby and nurse him for me." The princess told the baby's mother, "I will pay you for your help." So the woman took her baby home and nursed him. Later, when the boy was older, his mother brought him back to the Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her own son. The princess named him Moses, for she explained, "I lifted him out of water." So we'll pick this up again tomorrow. Let's go ahead and move on to Matthew. Yeah, we're picking up in Matthew. We're reading chapter 16, verse 13 to chapter 17, verse number 9. Peter's declaration about Jesus. When Jesus came to the region of Caesarea Philippi, he asked his disciples, "Who do you say the Son of Man is?" Well, they replied, "Some say that John the Baptist, some say Elijah, the others say Jeremiah, or one of the other prophets." Then he asked them, "But who do you say I am?" Simon Peter answered, "You are the Messiah, the Son of the living God." Jesus replied, "You are blessed, Simon, son of John, because my Father in heaven has revealed this to you. You did not learn this from any human being. Now I say to you that you are Peter, and upon this rock I'll build my church, and all the powers of hell will not conquer it. And I'll give the keys to the kingdom of heaven. Whatever you forbid on earth will be forbidden in heaven, and whatever you permit on earth will be permitted in heaven." Then he sternly warned his disciples not to tell anyone that he was the Messiah. Jesus predicts his death. From then on, Jesus began to tell his disciples plainly that it was necessary for him to go to Jerusalem, and that he would suffer many terrible things at the hands of the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but on the third day he would be raised from the dead. But Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. "Heaven forbid, Lord," he said. "This will never happen to you." Jesus turned to Peter and said, "Get away from me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap to me. You are seeing things merely as a human point of view, not from God's." Then Jesus said to his disciples, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must turn from your selfish ways, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang up on your life, you will lose it. If you try to give your life for my sake, you will save it. And if you do what do you benefit if you gain a whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? For the Son of Man will come, and his angels in the glory of his Father will judge all the people according to their deeds. And I tell you the truth, some standing here now will not die before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. Chapter 17, the Transfiguration. 6 days later, Jesus took Peter and two brothers, James and John, and led them up the high mountain to be alone. As the men watched, Jesus' appearance transformed so that his face shone like the sun, and his clothes became white as light. Suddenly Moses and Elijah appeared and began talking with Jesus. Peter exclaimed, "Lord, it's wonderful for us to be here. If you want, I'll make 3 shelters as memorials, one for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah." But even as he spoke, a bright cloud overshadowed them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my dearly loved Son, who brings me great joy. Listen to him." The disciples were terrified and fell face down on the ground. Then Jesus came over them and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Don't be afraid." And when they looked up, Moses and Elijah were gone, and they only saw Jesus. And they went back down the mountain. Jesus commanded them, "Don't tell anyone you have seen the Son of Man and has been raised from the dead." So we'll pick this up again tomorrow. Let's go ahead and read our psalm for the day. We're reading Psalm 21. How the king rejoices in your strength, O Lord. He shouts with joy because you give him victory. You have given him his heart's desire. You have withheld nothing he requested. You welcomed him back with success and prosperity. You placed a crown of finest gold on his head. He asked you to preserve his life, and you granted his request. The days of his life stretch on forever. Your victory brings great honor, and you have clothed him with splendor and majesty. You have endowed him with eternal blessing and given him the joy of your presence. For the king trusts in the Lord. The unfailing love of the Most High will keep him from stumbling. You will capture your enemies. Your strong hand will seize those who hate you, and you will throw them in flaming furnace when you appear. The Lord will consume them in his anger. Fire will devour them. You will wipe their children from the face of the earth. They will never have descendants. Although they plot against you, their evil schemes will never succeed, for they will turn and run when they see your arrows aimed at them. Rise up, O Lord, in all your power. With music and singing, we celebrate your mighty acts. So tomorrow we get to read Psalm 22, but let's go ahead and finish today with our Proverbs. So we get to finish today in Proverbs chapter 5, verses 1 through 6. Avoid immoral women. My son, pay attention to my wisdom. Listen carefully to my wise counsel. Then you will show discernment, and your lips will express what you learned. For the lips of an immoral woman are as sweet as honey, and her mouth is smoother than oil. But in the end, she is as bitter as poison, as dangerous as a double-edged sword. Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. For she cares nothing about the path of life. She staggers down a crooked trail and doesn't realize it. Wow. Be careful of that woman, I tell you. She'll get you every time. Thank you for joining me on day 25 of our journey. Hey, let me know how you're feeling about this. Let me know what you guys want to see, what you don't want to see. Give me a little feedback, a little this, a little that. Glad to have you with me. Hey, subscribe to my Patreon at www.patreon.com/YoungNemo. I'll leave a link in the description for that. Check that out. That's a good time. Appreciate any little help I get from that so I can get some new equipment and stuff like that. Hey, wouldn't be able to do this without you guys, but most importantly, I couldn't do this without the Lord. So, hey, glad to have you with me. And guess what? Even better, I'll see you tomorrow on day 26. Whoop!